Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. And in our previous session, we actually got to know about weathering, and in this session, you will get to know about erosion. I hope you are aware that we have already started with the exogenic forces. These forces are responsible for the eroding, for the wearing of our crust, or let's say our Earth surface. In previous session, we discussed that it's because of the temperature and the action of water, the chemical composition is changed in chemical weathering, and because of the thermal action, because of the action of temperature, when water response is changed, we can have a physical or mechanical weathering. And yes, if the water is released because of the living organism, that is what the biological weathering. We have already covered those aspects, and now I hope you can imagine that all of these three different set of weathering: physical, mechanical, chemical weathering, or let's say this hydration, this hydrolysis, oxidation, carbonation, and this biological weathering, all of them are taking place in with respect to their different variability at the surface of Earth. And because of that, the surface of Earth used to modify the same surface which is created by endogenic forces. The crust is destroyed, the crust is removed, the crust is wear down, the relief is wear down. Exogenic forces, exogenic processes. Let's continue, and I hope we are here with respect to the exogenic factors. You have a clarity, and yes, we have completed this section. We are starting with erosion. Weathering we have done. We are starting with erosion. All right. Let's start with the erosion. What do you mean by erosion? Erosion means what? Erosion means the process, or let's say the process, or let's say you can say the action of water through which or because of which there is a wearing away of slope. So erosion means the process of wearing away, removal of soil, removal of rock or sediment if it is there from the earth's surface by the natural agents like water, by air, by glacier it could be. That will be termed as what? Erosion. Erosion's literal means what? Erosion's literal meaning is when there is a removal of material from the slope itself. So whenever we have a removal of material from the slope itself, that will be termed as erosion. And the natural agent and the natural process who is carrying it out, that will be termed accordingly: fluvial erosion, glacial erosion, air or aeolian erosion. Okay, the name will be given accordingly. So here you can see in this particular image, it is because of the running water. It is because of the running water. It will cause some sort of friction here at the surface, because here we have a liquid, here we have a solid. I mean, at the atom or molecule level. So when the liquid atoms or molecules will going to have some sort of interaction with the solid atoms or molecules, or let's say land here and water here. So whenever the land and water will going to interact with each other, it's because water there is some sort of velocity, some sort of velocity in the water. It is because it is going through a particular slope. So when water is flowing through a particular slope, with reference to the gravity, there will be some sort of kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy is resulted in the flow of a stream. As a result of flow of a stream, that will going to exert friction. As a result of friction, there will be a removal of material, erosion. And yes, when the erosion is taking place because of this some sort of, let's say, steepness in the slope, whenever we have a gentle slope, or let's say where the velocity of water is slow, under the influence of gravity, there will be what? Under the influence of gravity, there will be a deposition. There will be deposition here. Let's say on the erosional slopes, or let's say the slope where the erosion is taking place, here the gravity is less with respect to the kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is more. That's why there is a removal of material. And when there we have a accumulation because of the less kinetic energy and more gravitational force, because of that there will be a deposition which will going to take place. So erosion and deposition both are what? Some sort of, we can say, the simultaneous process which will going to take place. If there is a erosion, there must be deposition. If there is a deposition, then there must be some sort of erosion at the other place. With respect to the weathering, this erosion is contrastingly different. Weathering was in situ process, but this weathering is what? Ex situ process. That the removal of material is taking place at one place and the deposition of material is taking place at other place. That means it is ex situ. The removal of taking place at one particular location, deposition is taking place at one specific particular location. So these processes of erosion and depositions both are what? Ex situ processes. And here we have what? Removal of material, transportation of material, then we will have a accumulation, and then we'll have what? Deposition of these material. We'll have what? Deposition of these material. Whatever material which has been removed by the natural agents, by the natural forces. I told you, unlike weathering, which is in situ, this in erosion, the broken material is there, and yes, it is what we can say the ex situ process. Moving ahead. Now, with respect to the erosion, when this removal, or let's say when this the set of the wearing down of slope, when it is done by running water, this running water will going to modify the surface. This running water will going to modify the slope, topography, and this process of change is called as fluvial landforms. This process of change is called as what? Fluvial landforms. That because of the flow of water, how the landforms, how the slope will going to change. I hope you can imagine that whatever crust is there, how there will be a veering down of that particular slope, and the way in which that particular slope is veering down, we will give a name to that particular slope, that is landform. So we will discuss about the fluvial landforms. So whenever we have a removal by air, that will be called as aeolian landforms. When same kind of removal is there because of the seawater, and how seawater will going to modify the crust, those slope which are different from each other in terms of their horizontal and vertical expansion, those will be called as sea landforms. Similarly, if we have a groundwater or limestone, that will be called as karst landform. Karst was the person who actually found these landforms, so the name is given accordingly. Yes, we have a glacier. If there is a removal and if there is a deposition because of the glacier, that will be termed as what? Glacial landforms. Means glacier itself will going to modify the slope, modify the topography on our earth surface, which we used to see. And I hope you remember, all of these processes are taking place outside of the crust. That's why they are called as exo, from outside. Okay, and they are modifying the crust which is actually developed by the endogenic forces. So wherever you see mountain, that means there is a more endogenic forces. Wherever you see some sort of plains, that means some sort of balance between the endogenic and exogenic. Wherever you see some sort of valleys, that means there are more exogenic forces. Wherever you see weird slopes of mountain, there is a more factor which is basically exogenic process. So whatever factors you see, whatever features, whatever slopes you see on the earth surface, those all features are basically the net balance between the endogenic forces and exogenic forces. However, we can see the result of these forces. We can see the result of these forces based on the appearance. We cannot predict that when these forces could be intensified, when these forces could be weak. That's why it is not science. Okay, moving ahead. Let's discuss about the fluvial landforms. That whenever there is a running water, so what kind of modification in the topography, what kind of modification in the surface itself will be brought by the movement, by the motion of water. And here we have these fluvial landforms. The landform means what? The topographical changes, the change in the slope, and the change in the slope is brought by flow of water. So fluvial landforms. Now before we begin, let's have some sort of clarity about some basic things with respect to these fluvial landform. First of all, suppose we have a surface, and when we have a running water, if this running water will cause this kind of erosion, if this running water will cause this kind of erosion, I mean from top to bottom. Let's say this is the top surface and this is what the bottom surface. If there is a top to bottom set of erosion, this will be called as what? Vertical erosion. This will be called as what? Vertical erosion. If there is some sort of horizontal erosion, this horizontal erosion will be called as what? Lateral. This horizontal erosion will be called as lateral erosion. And yes, when the water is moving ahead, it is also exerting some sort of erosional, some sort of removal, which is actually in the backward direction of the flow of water. And that set of erosion process will be called as what? Headward erosion. Headward erosion. Suppose we have a this land surface in this way, and suppose we have a running water. So because of the running water, if we have a vertical cutting, so because of the vertical cutting, we will have this shape, v-shaped valleys. And yes, if we have a lateral cutting, so we can have this kind of shape. We can have a more vertical cutting and we can have a lateral kind of erosion. And yes, if there is a movement which is behind, or let's say opposite to the flow of direction of water, that will be termed as what? Headward process in this erosion aspect. Now it's because of these three set of erosion we used to see different set of modification in our earth crust, and all of these are primarily being driven by flow of water. When the water's flow is fast, when the water flow is slow, as a result of that, topographical changes, or let's say the changes, will be observed on the slope of the earth. Those we are referring as landforms. Here we have this classification. We have this attrition, then we have a abrasion, then we have a solution, and then we have a hydraulic action. For you might be thinking that when the water is flowing, water is removing the material. Okay, water is eroding the soil bed, water is eroding the river channel, water is eroding the river bed. It is not. However, the erosion is taking place in the same way, but we have so many different processes. Those fundamental processes of erosion are resulted into a different aspect, the way in which they are operating. And for that reason, we have given different names to each of them. So first of all, when there is a pure action of what? Water, only water, if it is causing erosion, then we will call it as the erosion. Okay, suppose water is causing erosion, there will be some sort of rocks in water. So water and rocks, if both are causing what? Erosion. Water and rocks, those who are there in the water itself, suppose there is a river which is moving, and that river will cause what? Removal of rocks. Okay, pure action of land and water interaction. So when this water will cause a removal of that particular rock, that will be called as erosion. Same, when that rock is there in the mobile, when rock is there in the mobile medium, or let's say in the running water, so what we can say, the water is there and in the water we have a rock. So both water and rock will cause what? Erosion. When we have an erosion from this particular aspect, when the erosion is caused by rock including water, that will be called as abrasion. That will be called as what? Abrasion. This abrasion is just like that sandpaper. Okay, abrasion is just like that sandpaper. Clear? Then we can have a, like some sort of during the transportation, the rocks particle could collide with each other. When the rocks particle would going to collide with each other, when they are in the mobile medium, when they are in the running water, when they are in the river, so rocks and water, when they will lead to the removal, that will be called as abrasion. But because of the interaction between the rocks when they are in the running water, when they are in the river, so they will also going to collide with each other. When they will going to collide with each other, as a result of that, there will be a small rock fragments, that will be called as attrition. So the big rock particles which are there, these big pebbles will going to collide with each other, and they will convert it into the fine small sediments. They will be called as what? That process will be called as what? Attrition. That process will be called as what? Attrition. And yes, when we have these rocks, in these rocks, what we have? These rocks are comprised of minerals. So when we have a minerals in these rocks, and when the minerals are suspended in water, that water will be called as what? Solution. That water will be called as what? Solution. Hydraulic action means when water is interacting with the river bed, and when water is interacting with the river bed. So as a result of that, erosion or the cracks will be there. And yes, similarly here, what will happen? The air will going to accumulate, and that will be called as what? Hydraulic action. That will be called as hydraulic action.